Where are the passions of the people? Because as a congregation, yes, I am the senior leader. Yes, I am the senior pastor, but I don't work alone. I work alongside this congregation. Where are the passions of the people? And where are their fires burning? Where are resources able to be maximized? Where are the places where we can get the best return on our investment?
Welcome to the Lead Boldly podcast, where strategy meets action and leaders go from dreaming to doing. If you're a purpose-driven change maker ready to turn stalled plans into sustainable results, this show is your blueprint. Hosted by strategist and executive coach Deondra Wardelle, owner of On to the Next One Consulting. Each episode showcases bold leaders who bring strategy to life through people development, policy deployment, and continuous improvement. Tune in and gain the clarity, courage, and the tools you need to turn big ideas into real impact and make strategy a daily practice for your team.
Our guest for this episode is a trailblazing theologian and transformative leader, the Reverend Janae Pitts-Murdock, the first woman to serve as senior pastor of Light of the World Christian Church in its 159-year history. Known for her innovative leadership, Pastor Janae blends spiritual depth with strategic excellence. Under her guidance, Light of the World is thriving with cross-generational collaboration, a fully operational food pantry and garden, and a leadership culture grounded in care, inclusion, and community impact. From her powerful pulpit presence to her mentorship of emerging leaders, she's boldly redefining what it means to be the church in today's world. It is my pleasure to welcome Reverend Janae Pitts-Murdock. Hello, Pastor.
Hello. Thanks for having me today.
It is such a joy, honor, pleasure, all the adjectives to have you as a guest on our podcast. Thank you for your yes.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. Okay, Pastor, let's get right into it. So, you wear a lot of hats. You also wear some bad shoes, but that's a topic for another day. But you wear a lot of hats. You're pastor, preacher, mentor, wife, mom, sorority sister. You are a comedian, and so much more. So when you are not leading a church or changing lives, what is something surprising or fun that brings you joy?
Hallmark movies. That is how I decompress. That's how I just kind of veg out. It's through Hallmark movies. And I have watched so many Hallmark movies that, when it comes up on the on-demand screen, it's like I've seen almost everything in the catalog. So I'm like, okay, I need some new Hallmark movies. And my favorite Hallmark movies are the rom-coms.
Okay. That was my next question. Which genre is your favorite? The rom-coms. I love it. So, that explains, it shows more of your personality, the big heart that you have. You're so loving and compassionate. And also you're a comedian. You have some of the best jokes.
I don't know that I've ever been officially called a comedian in the introduction. And I'm honored.
Well, you have the best sense of humor. And the thing about it, you don't try to be funny. And that's what makes for a great comedian. It just comes naturally, like all of your other gifts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, your academic and professional journey is broad and deep, ranging from public policy and theology, and you even worked at the Pentagon. How have those different experiences shaped your approach to ministry and leadership?
Oh, well, I have been very fortunate to have had some amazing experiences. I've been able to work with some tremendous leaders who have influenced how I have grown as a leader and how I lead. And so I am grateful for the academic experiences, whether it was at the University of Michigan, at Carnegie Mellon University, at the University of Memphis. I'm grateful for my time in the Pentagon, and at other installations with the Department of Defense. I am grateful even for my time in the church and the ways that I've been able to lead and serve in churches in Memphis, Tennessee, in Detroit, Michigan, in Indianapolis, in Washington, D.C. And so, all of these experiences have formed me into who I am. And I would say a kind of courageous humility. It's paradoxical, but once you've walked through the Pentagon amongst 4-star generals, executives, when you are engaging in conversations that have to do with people's real lives, it can make you insensitive in some ways, but then it also humbles you and others. You realize that life is precious and life is temporary, but we do the best we can with the opportunities and the resources we have. And so, having lived in one part of my life in defense and then in the other part of my life in the church, it has created a kind of courageous humility. I am courageous. It's hard to be in an environment where I am scared. I'm also from Detroit. So I would say I ain't never scared, but I'm sure that there's probably some force that could make me a bit nervous. But I have a strong sense of courage, confidence, a sense of self-awareness that allows me to walk into various environments and various situations, being very sure about who I am and what assets I bring to a circumstance. I'm also humble because I realize that confidence and courage that is untempered, that is undisciplined, that is unbalanced can be violent and cruel. And so I also strive to keep my feet on the ground, to keep a kind of humility where I recognize that everybody has something to offer. Everybody brings something to the table. Every human deserves dignity. And that kind of feet on the ground humility helps to balance my confidence, helps to balance my courage, so that when I walk into different spaces and places, I can bring all of who I am, but I also realize I'm not the only one in the room.
That courageous humility so accurately defines what people, I don't want to speak for everyone else, I'll speak for myself, but what I see in you. You are such a risk taker. You're not afraid to make bold leaps, to try new things, to run an experiment, but all of that is tempered by your humility, your own humanity, and how you see the humanity in others. And one of the reasons you're so willing to take these big risks, because you're ready to do big, bold things for the betterment of other people. So I love that courageous humility.
Thank you. Thank you. I deeply believe that we each have something to offer. And our something to offer, when it is matched with what someone else has to offer, can create something new and something wonderful and something meaningful for the world in which we live. And I grieve that there are so many individuals who do not recognize the power that exists in their gifts, skills, and abilities.
Agreed. And for those people in leadership, being able to recognize the talent and opportunity with those they lead. So love it. And all that ties back to leading boldly. So speaking of courageous humility and being a risk taker, when I introduced you, I referred to you as a trailblazer. And you are the first woman to lead Light of the World Christian Church in over 150. Let me make sure I get those numbers right. As senior pastor, as one of your famous sayings, how kind of God. What does that legacy and responsibility mean to you?
Oh my gosh. It is a heavy weight. It is a wonderful gift. Our church was formed in 1866, which means that our congregation was formed in a time when African Americans were dehumanized and devalued. But there was a group of individuals who loved themselves and loved God enough to form a Christian community where they could worship and serve and praise and equip and edify their community in a way that honored who they were. So I get to lead in a congregation that was formed in the belly of racism, in the belly of segregation, in the belly of what some might even argue was the worst part of American history, particularly for African Americans. And so while we were on the horizon, or we were looking forward to Reconstruction, we're on the other side of the Civil War, Black people were still not fully human at the time, or at least not treated as if they were fully human. And so I now get to lead a congregation that was formed from those volatile beginnings. And yes, more than 150 years after our founding, the church was courageous enough to call a woman to be their senior leader. What does that mean to me? It means that I have the responsibility to carry the legacy into which I was born. I have a responsibility to carry the stories of those who formed this congregation in 1866. I also have a responsibility to leverage their stories, leverage their histories, so that 150 years from now, there's still a church here. There is still a community here. There is still something that can be a blessing and a contribution to the community of the future. And so I see it as a gift to be able to carry the stories and the legacy of my ancestors from 1868, 1866, all the way to now and into the future. And I will offer this as a kind of story. In the Old Testament, we meet a man named Joseph in the book of Genesis. Joseph is in Egypt. He is there by a series of circumstances, but he lands in Egypt in the midst of famine. He is there, but he is so shrewd and so smart that he is able to gather resources so that the people have food to eat in the midst of the famine. Eventually, his family moves to Egypt, and he tells his family, he said, listen, when I die, do not leave my bones here in Egypt, but carry my bones from Egypt to the land that God has promised our people. Don't leave me here, but take me into the future, into the land that God has promised our people. So when Joseph dies, his brothers carry his bones from Egypt into where God has promised them, right? And that's when Moses shows up. Moses shows up. This is after slavery. Moses shows up, carries the bones of Joseph from Egypt through the wilderness and toward the promised land. But Moses dies before Moses gets to the promised land. So it is Joshua who takes Joseph's bones from the wilderness and carries them into the promised land. In other words, Joseph, Moses, and Joshua are all part of one liberating story. I see myself as part of one big liberating story, from my ancestors in 1866 to all of the predecessors that brought me to 2022 when Light of the World, when I began my tenure at Light of the World, even to now where we are and into the future, because we are we are part of one big story.
Pastor, that's good. And that connectivity of being a part of not just a chapter or a few pages, but one big story, that that helps to shed some light on different things that I've noticed about your career and, the different roles that you had and the different roles where you've served. And, throughout your career in ministry, you have continue to connect all these stories. You have led churches through major transitions. What mindset and practices help you stay clear, calm, and courageous during those pivotal moments?
I believe in calculated risk. God was a risk taker. God bet everything on humanity. And God formed the world. God formed creation. God formed humans as part of that creation. God took a big risk on humans. And even when humans did not do all that humans should have done, God offered these kind of level ups. If we were to gamify it, God provided these opportunities along the way for humans to self-correct, for humans to course correct. And as a leader, I take calculated risks. If God can take big risks on humanity, I can take a big risk on God. And I can trust that these opportunities that God brings into my path, that I can, with clarity of thought, with purity of heart, with authenticity of intention, can lead a people from idea to execution. And along the way, we might need to course correct, but believing that big risks have big payoffs. And I don't do it for my own benefit, but I do it for the benefit of the people that I serve, the people I get to work with, and for the God who brings us into these amazing opportunities. Calculated risk.
And those calculated risks, along with allowing for the learning journey when things may not go as expected, but you step back, you course correct, and you continue to move forward. That I want to bring that forward and talk about the theme that Light of the World has for 2025. So, a part of taking those big risks, along with that, it requires vision. It requires, okay, what is our destination? What are we working towards? Where are we heading? And then looking at the historical aspect, and you're talking about this story that continues. So the theme for Light of the World this year is 2025, our year to thrive.
Yes.
What a year it is. So, what inspired that theme and how is it guiding the church's work for 2025?
Oh my gosh, great question. So, our theme this year is 2025, our year to thrive. These last 6 years, we have been intentionally and strategically building something. When I arrived at Light of the World Christian Church, I arrived as the interim pastor in August of 2019. Our church had just come off of a leadership transition. Our senior pastor resigned. Our church went through a season without a senior leader. But even when that senior leader resigned, he had had several years of highs and lows as he was the successor of a 43-year leader. So by the time I arrived as the interim, our church had gone through a series of significant leadership transitions, significant congregational grief as a consequence of those transitions. Our congregation had also experienced significant congregational loss, and some would even call it congregational decline. So I arrived as the interim, and then 6 months after my arrival, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So now we're not gathering in person. They have an interim leader, first woman in more than 100 years of our existence. And so the church was navigating some uncertainty. The church was navigating what some would call an emotional congregational crisis. So it was necessary for me to lead intentionally and strategically. I couldn't do anything that was irrational, anything that was that some would call impetuous. I had to be very thoughtful and very methodical in how I helped move the congregation through its grief, through its uncertainty, through a new leader in a woman, through a pandemic, and then also rebuild our congregational identity. And so over the last 6 years, we've been intentionally moving through a process of a kind of congregational fortification, strengthening the areas where we are weak, fortifying our infrastructure, becoming more clear about our commitments, our convictions, and who we are as a congregation. And we have made some amazing strides. We've built some great leaders. We participated in some great leadership development. We've made some hard choices around how we navigate our internal processes. And so we've had 6 years of hard work, and we've been building and investing and building and investing. We finally reached 2025, and it's time to ride this wave. So that's why we call it 2025, our year to thrive, because this is the time when we are experiencing the outcomes, experiencing the energy, experiencing the vitality of all of the investments we've been making on the ground across these last few years. So I am excited and thrilled about who our church is becoming. I often say that Light of the World, that God is calling us to be a vibrant, life-giving congregation that multiplies powerful disciples of Jesus Christ. We are growing somewhere, we are going somewhere, and this year has been our year to thrive.
Pastor, I must pause and shake the praise egg. I must pause and shake the praise egg, because that is good news. And indeed, Light of the World is going somewhere. It is so obvious that, in these past years, through all the transition, that Light of the World is building something. It is building something magnificent, not only for the members of the church, but for the community. And, one of the things that really stands out about Light of the World is deeply, deeply engaged in the community, from food justice to mental health support. How do you prioritize and sustain such impactful outreach while still nurturing internal growth within Light of the World?
There is a dear soror of mine who said to me, Janae, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And I have tried to listen to the Spirit. What is God doing in us? Where is God working? And how can I work? How can we work where God is working? Where are the passions of the people? Because as a congregation, yes, I am the senior leader. Yes, I am the senior pastor, but I don't work alone. I work alongside this congregation. Where are the passions of the people? And where are their fires burning? Where are resources able to be maximized? Where are the places where we can get the best return on our investment? Now, ROI is something that I learned when I was working on my master's of public policy and management. ROI is a business principle. And those of us who live in the world of cost benefit analysis, those of us who live in the world of assets, liabilities, those of us who live in the world of debits and credits, we also live in the world of ROI, return on investment. If I invest $1, what do I get back? Now, in secular society, that language can become patriarchal and harmful in that we are only looking at transactional relationships. How much do I get in return? How much do I get back for what I invest? And it can minimize the value that one might get out of an experience. but I adapt the ROI concept in my nonprofit spiritual world. For every dollar, for every moment, for every story, for every investment that we as a congregation make, what do we give back in return? Sometimes we get money in return. Sometimes we get a life rescued in return. Sometimes we get a marriage saved in return. Sometimes we get positive publicity. There are all kinds of returns we get for the investments we make. But I particularly look for what is the most long-term investment? What is the most long-term return we can get, right? So if I am able to pay for counseling for a teenager, that's a long-term, that's a short-term investment, but a long-term return. And so I'm looking at ROI. What is the return on our investment? And how might Light of the World make thoughtful, intentional investments in very needed areas so that we can make an impact in community? You've named food justice. Here in Indianapolis, there is so much food insecurity. And while we cannot solve the problem of food insecurity, we can use our resources to alleviate some of the discomfort that many families are experiencing. So not only do we provide free food to those who need it, we also harvest fresh fruits and vegetables. Because just because I am food insecure does not mean that I don't need healthy foods. Just because I cannot afford fresh produce doesn't mean that my body doesn't need it. So we harvest fresh fruits and vegetables in our garden because people who are food insecure deserve fresh fruits and vegetables. We fund mental health counseling for every teenager who is a part of our church. Why do we do that? Because teens are currently part of the highest demographic experiencing self-doubt, experiencing self-mutilation, and thoughts of death by suicide. And so it makes sense that we would pay for mental health counseling by licensed therapists and counselors for our youth. Because if we can save a life in high school, in middle school, then they can save a life when they get to college. But these are just some of the investments we make here at Light of the World because it brings a long-term return.
And you see the connection on taking church beyond the four walls in terms of making that impact in the community and looking at or really seeing that return on investment. One of the things that we often talk about, and I don't know that I've shared this, I think it's implied, but I'm a member of Light of the World. And, yes, proud member of Light of the World. And it is your leadership style. And you talk about, those things, those terms, those concepts that you hear in the corporate world or, outside of the church. Those principles apply in the church, but however, they're viewed through the lens of humanity, doing what's best for others, making sure that return on investment is not transactional, but it is for the betterment of people so they can thrive, not only in 2025, but beyond. And, the other thing that is really noticeable at Light of the World is that it's a ministry that embraces interfaith. And it demonstrates respect for people, which is one of the core tenets of practicing lean, and unapologetic inclusion. People are welcome at Light of the World. No question about it. All people. So how do you cultivate a culture of radical welcome while staying mission focused?
Well, it begins with me. I work on my own prejudices. I work on my own biases. I do my best to be aware of the places in my own heart that need correction and need transformation. And when I am honest about my own humanity, it helps me to respect the humanity of others. Everybody needs love. Everybody deserves love. And I just keep my own prejudices in check. And I continue to question myself. Janae, okay, if you have an issue with that, why? Where does that come from? Where are the roots of that? So that I am better able to love people the way Jesus loved people. And I talk about how God sent God's one and only Son into the world, Jesus, not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And if God did not send Jesus to condemn, why would I do it? So I do my best to lead with love, lead with care, and lead in the tension that we all show up with prejudices and biases, that we have all been shaped in some kind of social environment that teaches us to accept some and reject others. And recognizing that we all kind of live in this tension, and to make room for nurturing a liberating and a freeing path forward. And everybody can do it. It's not easy, but it can be done. And so I start with me. I can't lead others to a place I'm not willing to go. So I start with me. And I strive to be the person that I want to encourage others to be. And so I'm grateful that I get to serve alongside and lead with other people who are as radically inclusive as I am. We might not have all started in the same place, but we're all trying to get there. And I remember preaching a sermon about the Good Samaritan, where, there is this person who is on the road. He's been beaten, he's been robbed, he's been left to languish in the road, and all the expected people, the priest passed by, like all the people that you would expect to help, all the religious people walk by. But then it is the person who is the Samaritan. And in this particular biblical time, the Samaritan was the despised person, the second class citizen. This Samaritan is a person who actually helps the person who has fallen in need on the ground. But I asked the congregation, I was like, who is the person that you would least expect? Who is the person that you loathe the most? And what would you do if that was the person who came to your aid? These are the invitations that God extends to us, is to think about who are the people that we loathe, and in what ways might we bring salvation and healing to that kind of relationship. And so here at Light of the World, we just try to be a place where we can include others. Now, some would say that has to do with race, that has to do with gender and sexuality, which is true. But it also has to do with the people we ignore and overlook, the people who have physical limitations, the people who have intellectual limitations, the people who have financial limitations. And so as a congregation, we are also trying to be aware of the people in our families, in our societies that we also overlook and dehumanize in a way. So we've launched a culture of care. And when we talk about a culture of care, we talk about how might we show concern for people who are often ignored, overlooked, people who have been invisibilized in our society. And so, Light of the World right now, we are equipping ourselves to be more caring so that we might show concern to people who've been invisibilized in our midst.
And, another group that often gets overlooked are people who are more advanced in age, the senior saints. And one of the things that's so noticeable, you can't help but to see it, is it is not uncommon to see someone that is more advanced in age serving alongside in ministry with a youth. There's not a youth Sunday per se. Youth Sunday is every Sunday. But by that same token, you see members of other age groups all serving together. Cross generational leadership is flourishing at Light of the World. What strategies are successfully connecting the different generations, and what lessons can other leaders learn from the approach that's being taken at Light of the World to be more intentional about making sure that people of all age groups are included?
One, it's a value that we have here at our church. We value every demographic, every social demographic. We value every age demographic. We do not preference any age group over another. A child is just as much a member of Light of the World as a senior is. And I am as much the pastor of an 8-year-old as I am the pastor of an 80-year-old. At every age and stage, folks have value here at Light of the World Christian Church. It is an intentional part of our identity to be cross-generational, intergenerational, multi-generational. And you're right. We have old and young serving together in ministry here at Light of the World Christian Church. So it's a non-negotiable. It is a non-negotiable that here at Light of the World, old and young will serve together, will worship together, and will honor and love each other. And all of us will get old one day. Should God be kind to us, we will all reach our 80s and 90s. In fact, not too long ago, we celebrated the life of one of our dearest members who passed away at 102 years old. And so it is a value, it is a part of who we are, that no matter what age you are, you matter here at Light of the World Christian Church. But the other thing is that we intentionally equip our leaders and volunteers to serve in teams. I am a team pastor. We work in groups. We are intentionally learning about group dynamics, forming, storming, norming, performing, the Tuckman model. It's old, but it's good. And we operate in teams. We work alongside each other. We listen to each other. We practice active listening alongside the teams, our teammates. And so our Gen Zs are light years apart from our boomers and our silent generation. But when we listen to each other, when we try to understand what each other is saying, when we try to understand the things that matter in those generations, then we're more able, more apt to serve alongside each other.
Pastors, as we, all of us, look at this season of ministry. And as you look at this season of ministry from your vantage point as a leader and as the leader of Light of the World, what gives you the most hope and what excites you as you continue to shepherd and pastor and mentor Light of the World and those who follow Light of the World to fulfill its calling as a vibrant, life-giving congregation?
You're going to make me cry because hindsight is such an encouragement. Reflecting on where we've come from, how far we've come, reflecting on our highs and our lows, our successes, our learnings, reflecting on these things and and the smart moves we've made along the way and the payoffs that have come from hard decisions and tough conversations and difficult moments, it gives me hope. I know that the Lord has not brought us this far to leave us. I know that we have not come this far to fail, to falter. I have hope and confidence because where we've already been, I have hope about where we are going. I also have hope when I look at the youth here at Light of the World Christian Church. I can't speak for any other church, but we have an amazing youth ministry here at Light of the World. And I celebrate the ways that our youth partner with other youth ministries across the city so that they might encourage each other, they might push each other, and they might be support for one another along the journey. I get so much joy when I watch young people share their testimonies, grow in faith. When I watch these young people bring their friends to church, when I remember there was a time when I happened to be here at the church. It was on a summer afternoon. And there was a young man who had met our church through our outreach ministry. He walked 2 miles in the blazing sun. He wasn't even a member yet, but he had met our ministry through outreach. He got to our church, walked 2 miles in the blazing sun. When he got to the door of the church, he said, "I just need to talk to somebody." And that young man, from that day until now, has grown, evolved. He's grown in his faith. He's grown in his own self-awareness and how he engages the world. But he's only one story of so many examples of individuals, of youth, young folks who are growing in their faith and growing in their positive relationships with others. So I have so much hope. Even when I encounter difficult situations, I'm like, listen, I know what God has already done, and I'm hopeful about what God will do in our future. I could use you as an example, Deondra. When I think about when I met you here at Light of the World Christian Church, when you wouldn't even call me by my name, you only
No.
called me Reverend Interim Pastor, right? How far we've come. And the ways that you now sit on our church council, the ways you are now investing in ministry, the ways your own personal brand has multiplied and evolved, and the ways that you are allowing the ministry that we have here at Light of the World Christian Church to fuel you, your passion, your energy. I get excited when I think about the ways people in our church are exploding in their own personal lives, because it means something special is happening here at Light of the World. And I get excited that I get to participate in what is happening.
You know, the stories at Light of the World are so powerful. And you talked about you might cry. You know, I'm a crybaby. So, and the other thing I always say, I don't know what you and the music ministry have against my eyelashes. I thought my eyelashes would be safe on my own podcast, and yet they are not. But, you know, it is those stories, all of us in Light of the World, and those who are watching this and listening to this podcast, I hope they understand that it's the stories of how human beings always overcome no matter what. We persevere, we get through, and that gives us hope. And so that is especially encouraging to be in an environment where sometimes you forget about how far you have come, and looking at others and seeing how far they've come, that can be an encouragement to you to keep moving on to the next one. So, Pastor, as we wrap up, and as I try to pull myself together, we are going to, it's formally called Rapid Fire. This is the first episode where we're calling it something new, because Rapid Fire, I was like, that's not on brand. What we're moving to are crowned leadership jewels.
Okay.
Words of wisdom to share. Okay. So the first question, what does lead boldly mean to you?
To walk into the future that God is forming with confidence, with clarity, and with reckless abandon, knowing that the same God who has formed you and shaped you and built you and crafted you is the God who is accompanying you into the future that is being formed.
Amen. Now, please share a favorite quote, a leadership resource, or habit you would recommend to our audience.
Okay, I have multiples. Favorite
Okay.
quote. Number one, this is Ed Ziders, who is the former president of the United Theological Seminary. He said, "Make of yourself the best use to Christ and the church." So I live by that. Second one is Fannie Lou Hamer. Whether you have a PhD or no D, we in this bag together. And whether you graduated from Morehouse or no house, we're in this bag together. All right. So those are quotes that I carry with me. All right. Now, in terms of a leadership principle, a leadership resource, I have found Craig Groeschel to be a helpful voice in my head. And the Global Leadership Summit has a slogan. They say, everyone wins when the leader gets better. Everyone wins when the leader gets better. So those are my 3 jewels.
Okay. And we will make sure to include those in the notes so that everyone watching can one, remember those quotes, and then two, follow that leadership resource. So, Pastor, what is the best way for listeners to follow all of the wonderful, life-changing, life-giving, life-breathing things that are happening at Light of the World Christian Church?
I'm so glad you asked. Folks who want to connect with us at Light of the World can come to our website, lovelwcc.org, lovelwcc.org. They can also find us on social media. They can find us on Instagram. They can find us on Facebook. And as my kids would say, I'm also Googleable. So if you ever need me, just reach out, and I would love to be a help and an encouragement to you on your journey.
Pastor Janae, thank you for joining us on Lead Boldly. Thank you for being a guest on this podcast. You are such a breath of fresh air. Your wisdom, your authenticity, and unwavering commitment to cultivating bold and inclusive leadership, it's inspiring. And I'm so grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your mentorship and who you are in my life and your powerful example as a transformative leader in both faith and community. So thank you again for being with us. And to our guests, don't forget to share and subscribe our Lead Boldly podcast series and register for our upcoming Lead Boldly webinars via my website, DeondraWardelle.com. Until the next time we gather, remember to embrace your royal calling to lead boldly, build strategically, and impact endlessly.
Thanks for listening to the Lead Boldly podcast with Deondra Wardelle. If today's episode helped you take one step closer from dreaming to doing, be sure to follow the show and subscribe on YouTube. You can also learn more at DeondraWardelle.com. And if you know a leader ready to bring strategy to life through continuous improvement and bold action, share this episode with them. Until the next time, let's continue to lead boldly, build strategically, and impact endlessly.
Keep on moving on.